you are in university, I would encourage you to get involved with as many societies, any sort of extracurricular activities. Throw yourself at everything and develop your time management skills. That's going to really help you come into a job.
What do you think you wish you knew?
With university, obviously you're putting a lot less of your sort of overall time in life towards it.
I'm going to study in California. So what advice would you give to, I guess, someone like me?
My biggest advice is throw yourself into whatever culture, whatever country it is. Throw yourself into those friend circles as much as you sort of can. The biggest piece of advice I would give freshers is look out for spring weeks, those sort of internship opportunities in your first year. Try to understand what spring weeks are, what are insight weeks.
I generally think like these startup internships are so useful.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's one of the worst job markets there's ever been, so
it's cooked.
It is cooked.
Hello everyone, today I'm here with Nish, who is an associate at AlphaSights, and he left uni a year ago. So yeah,
already here.
Welcome Nish, thank you for coming today.
No problem.
I guess just briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Nish. Like you said, I've been working at AlphaSights now for a little while. Left uni about a year ago. I studied philosophy, politics and economics over at King's College London. And yeah, really enjoyed my time. I think university was a fantastic experience for me, exactly where I wanted to go. And, you know, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little later, but things like the society I worked on whilst I was there really shaped my sort of university experience. And yeah, I kind of knew sort of going into uni that I wanted to get some sort of corporate job in the city here in London. And yeah, I mean, I'm glad I'm here. So there you go.
Nice, lovely, lovely. So you've been at AlphaSights for what is it?
Probably about five-ish months.
Okay, 5 months. Wow. Okay.
So not too long.
Okay,
yeah.
Not too long, but also a few months after university.
Yeah.
I guess at the start when you joined, sort of, what do you think you wish you knew that you know now?
In terms of applying for a job or actually being in the job?
In terms of being in the job.
In terms of being in the job. I think the thing I wish I knew at the time is just how up and down it can be, right? So with university, obviously you're putting a lot less of your sort of overall time in life towards it. Whereas with your job, obviously it's like, you know, 40, 50, sometimes more hours a week, depending on what job you're doing. So there's a lot more time, so to speak, for things to be very up and down. And I think especially in a sort of fast-natured role, like here at AlphaSights, that can be perhaps even more pronounced. But yeah, I wouldn't even say that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that's the sort of stuff that keeps you going because there's an old age quote that says that, you know, to experience a high, you must have experienced a low. So, you know, if you're going to feel good about your job, you also need to feel like your job is tough at times, right? So, yeah, I think that allows me to sort of thrive more in a sense, as opposed to a job that's very flat and kind of the same thing every day, which would have been my worst nightmare for sure.
I agree. You always need something keeping you going.
Yeah, absolutely. You want something different every day. Like that's the main thing. And you want to be learning different things every day. And I think that's something you can really do at AlphaSights as well. So yeah, if it wasn't for those two features, which are both really positive, a job would feel kind of monotone and like you're going in and you're doing the same things and the same emails or whatever every day. But I think with those two features, one, it is very different every day and it can be interesting. But because it's different every day, some days you won't like it at the same time, right? So yeah, that's what I mean by that sort of more up and down nature, especially opposed to university.
You mentioned at university that obviously not that much time is dedicated on university.
Correct, yeah.
How did you personally find the transition from university to full-time work? And to graduates who probably are going to be watching this, who are joining in September, some people in October, some people probably already joined, what advice would you give them to sort of balance that transition from university to full-time work?
Yeah.
Because I think it's quite difficult.
Yeah, it definitely can be. I mean, I'll segment my advice to two sort of groups of people. One, I guess, people who are still in university and those who are just about to leave, right? So I'd say if you are in university, I would encourage you to get involved with as many societies, any sort of extracurricular activity. It doesn't have to be business focused. It can be anything. Throw yourself at everything and develop your time management skills. That's going to really help you come into a job and not feel overwhelmed by the amount of time you then put into a job. So for me, when I was at university, as I mentioned, I was, really involved in a society called King's Business Club. That in itself was like a full-time job, genuinely, especially by the time I got the presidency in the final year. I also ran my own tutoring company, tutoring startup, which is still going, and I was doing my degree on top. So it's 3 big things, and as a result, I was spending a lot of time, say quote unquote working. I say quote unquote because things like working on my company doesn't necessarily feel that much like work, and working on the business society also isn't strictly work. But it just meant that my time had to be efficiently managed, and I think that's the main point I'm trying to get across. If you can develop that skill in university, you're going to find it a lot easier to not just perform at your work, but not find full-time work itself overwhelming.
Yeah, very interesting. That I think that's really good advice. So you mentioned, obviously, you were at King's Business Society and you're president of it.
Yeah.
What sort of learnings did you get from that experience, and how does one achieve, I guess, being able to become president of such a big student society? Well, if I'm correct, is the largest business student society in London.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe even the UK. I mean, it's quite insane looking back at it. So, in the year that I was president, I was there for the whole 3 years whilst I was at university. But in the final year when I was president, we had 116 committee members actively working on a day-to-day basis in the society. So it very much feels like you're kind of running a company at that point, right? I think to get to that point where you're becoming, I guess, like a president of any sort of society, university, I think the first thing is to get involved at the grassroots level and make an impact there and make yourself well known. And then it's just like a very accelerated version of a corporate ladder, right? Like you make yourself well known in first year, you establish yourself, you prove yourself as someone who's reliable. Then maybe in second year, you get to some sort of semi-management position, so to speak, and you prove yourself there. And then, you sort of prove yourself as someone who might be able to run the whole club or the whole society. And I think that's the approach I took. So in first year, I was, just an analyst in one of the committees, many departments rather, in King's Business Club. In second year, I was running their sort of consulting division, which was actually new at the time as well. And then by third year, I was sort of running the whole club. So for King's Business Club particularly, yes, it feels like a very squeezed in, accelerated corporate ladder experience. But, this kind of applies to any society. It doesn't have to be business society, so to speak, any sporting societies. You might come in and just play the sport in first year. Then you might, take up a treasury position or, something just below the president or captain or whatever it might be, and then you sort of take the full reins of the club in that sort of last year. And I think it mirrors what happens in the corporate world quite well as well. You come in at the grassroots level, you prove yourself, you prove that you're reliable, you take on more responsibility, and then maybe one day you run the whole thing. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree. I think at university it's so important to join society and join from freshers, from first year.
Yeah,
and see if you can build it across the 3 years. Obviously, I know you studied abroad for a part of your time during university at Singapore.
Yeah.
So with the society, how did going to Singapore work? How did you balance your time, and how did you balance your relationships with the society? Given that you probably became president, was it during your time at Singapore or just after?
Well, so no, it was near the end of my time.
Oh, okay.
I was sort of elected as president, so to speak. But during my time at Singapore, I was sort of heading up what's called King Strategy, which is their sort of consulting arm. So we did pro bono consulting strategy projects for, various companies that we worked for. And that was done whilst I was in Singapore. And I think more than anything, it was managing the time zones rather than managing
I was gonna say,
anything else. So yeah, it was like an 8-hour time difference, which was kind of crazy. But what it meant is in the mornings and afternoons, I kind of was in my own little Singapore bubble, right? Because the UK was asleep.
Yeah.
So I did whatever uni work I needed to do. I might go out with friends, right? And then if I needed to do any work that particular evening, which is to be fair, most evenings, but then I would sort of lock in about sort of 7 p.m. Singapore time. Okay, people in the UK start to come online. I can have meetings. I can, see people online, message people, etc., get some work done. So I think just understanding that was, and developing a shaping my work ethic around that was also important, because even today, like here at AlphaSights, for example, because London is so uniquely situated in the middle of the world, right? In my mornings, I'm very much contacting, experts in Asia and Europe as well, of course. Yeah. I mean, Europe the whole day because it's Europe. But then in my afternoons, it's very much cool the Americans out, right? Like, so, even being in Singapore then taught me a little bit about how you adapt to time zones and how business adapts to time zones in different parts of the world, and how that shapes business itself in that part of the world too. So, it was a super valuable experience. Was it a little trickier, sort of just meeting people online? Of course. But I think because I had developed such a good relationship with everyone so far, like, as I said, I've been there at that point 1.5 years. It wasn't like trying to build a new relationship with anyone. It was just maintaining relationships you'd already built. And one thing that was really good is Singapore was in my second term for my second year.
Oh, okay.
So in my first term and my second year, I was heading up King Strategy, and I met everyone in person. I developed those relationships in person. And then second semester, it was kind of just like my co-principal would take the in-person lead in things, and I would very much support from like a remote perspective.
Interesting. So I'm going to study in California this coming fall.
Golden State.
Yeah, I know. In Orange County.
Yeah.
Obviously, doing a study abroad is quite nerve-wracking. I guess just a very weird experience for a lot of people. Is going abroad by themselves, completely to a new country where they know no one. So, what advice would you give to, I guess, someone like me or students who are considering some sort of abroad program throughout their time at university, whether that be teaching abroad or studying abroad or doing an internship abroad? How do you make the most of it, and sort of your advice to it?
Of course. I think the easiest thing to do when you do study abroad, and I think international students can also probably relate to this as well, is it's very easy to just make friends with people from back home.
Yeah.
Right. And my biggest advice is try consciously to not just do that. Obviously, you'll have your friends from back home. It's very much needed for that sort of home comfort sort of feeling. But throw yourself into like whatever culture, whatever country it is, throw yourself into those friend circles as much as you sort of can. And I think that's what's going to make that study abroad experience the most valuable to you. Is, in a way, it's kind of painful because you're going to have a friend that's like far away forever. But also, like, the best thing is if you ever go to that part of the world, you can count on that friend being there for you, and vice versa, right? So, you'll always have your friends at home. That's never going to change. The biggest piece of advice I would give anyone studying abroad is take it on yourself and like beat yourself. Like, I'm going to try and make some friends from this country. So for you, but I'm going to try and make some friends who live in California, who go to this uni, right? I'm not just going to stick to the other study abroad students, because that's, I think, the way you're going to really take in the culture and be enriched from the experience. Obviously, America, like, maybe the culture isn't massively different, right? I get that, but definitely, like any other sort of study abroad country, like I would say that's a big priority for sure.
Okay, so you've had clearly a very interesting university experience, and now you're working. I guess for freshers and sort of just other university students who are all going back to university or joining university for the first time in September, what would be sort of your key tips and advice for them, and how would they make the best out of university and set themselves up for success when it does come to eventually applying for internships or graduate schemes?
So, for those that are interested in sort of city careers, corporate careers, the biggest piece of advice I would give freshers is look out for spring weeks and those sort of internship opportunities in your first year, because even if you're not really interested in, say, let's just say, for example, you don't care about investment banking, okay, but you want some sort of city career, some sort of corporate career, after you graduate university. Still, the best thing you can do is just get a big name on your CV in that first year. And I think a lot of students, especially those that come from sort of working class backgrounds like myself, I went into the first year of uni, I didn't know anything about Insight Week, Spring Weeks. I didn't know what any of that was. I only sort of started to understand it when I heard other people apply, like they're applying to it. And by that point, it's already kind of late, right? So I'd say, the biggest piece of advice I would give is before September starts, try to understand what Spring Weeks are, what are Insight Weeks, why are they useful, what sort of firms could I target? And it does not matter if you don't care about investment banking, because that seems to be only Spring Weeks out there. It doesn't matter. Just get a big name on your CV and then you can do whatever you want after that. That's the biggest piece of advice I'd give, and that definitely comes from experience.
Okay. Can you talk to me more about sort of whether you did any internships or Insight Weeks during university and how that's helped?
So I guess in first year I didn't. So by the time I had learned about what Insight Weeks were and what Spring Weeks were, most of the applications are closing down. And I was also quite I don't want to do investment banking. I have no interest in it. So why would I apply to these? It only dawned on me in second year. I mean, I ended up still getting internships, etc. in second year. So it turned out okay. And in first year, I ended up getting a sort of insight program at BCG a little later into the year.
That's a good one.
So yeah, it turned out okay. But what I'm trying to say is it very easily could not have, right? Not that it ruins your chances. It definitely doesn't, but it just makes your life a lot easier if you can get a big name on your CV in first year and just know about the fact that they exist from September. Because it just makes your life easier. It never stops you from getting opportunities in the future. It's never ever the end of the world. I have to stress that because everyone makes it sound like it is, but it makes your life easier. So why not do it?
Okay, interesting. And then did you do internships in second year?
Yeah. So in second year, actually, it was really interesting. So like I mentioned, I was working in King's Strategy over at King's Business Club. I was leading their sort of strategy consulting arm. One of the clients that we were working for actually asked me if I was free in the summer.
That's nice.
And wanted to do an internship. And I sort of looked at the options I had available and I was like, so just for comparison, if you do any other internship in any sort of corporate company, you're going to go in there. It's going to take a while for you to understand first what that company actually does. Even though you've probably spent your whole application pretending like you know everything, it does take time. And by the time you actually start doing work, you're probably not going to be able to make an impact, so to speak, in an internship. You will on your personal career development, but you're definitely not going to make an impact on the company, so to speak, right? At least that's my opinion. But with the startup, the name is Taxed, by the way. I'd definitely check them out. Really cool self-assessment sort of tax software company. I was told that I would be just put in charge of all their paid ads. So Google, Facebook, Instagram, everything. And they had, a pretty sizable budget for it. And I was going to be in charge of the whole thing. And I thought early on in my career, when am I going to be able to make an impact like that? Right. Yeah. So yeah, I took that opportunity in a heartbeat, and it was super, super cool working in, at that time, probably a small startup. Now, not so small anymore. They've done really well for themselves. But yeah, I learned a lot about sort of not just, yes, I learned a lot about Google ads, Facebook ads, etc. But I also learned a lot about how a startup functions. One thing I remember so vividly, and one of the benefits of being in a startup, is I was sort of reviewing their pricing models for the summer, because obviously tax season is in April. So in the summer, not as many people are submitting tax returns. And that is a bit of a cash flow issue, usually, for a tax filing company. And as a result, they try to discount the pricing in the summer to encourage people to still file taxes in the summer. And I looked at the customers that were coming through in the summer period. I looked at, obviously, the discounting that we had, which was making it tricky to make my Google Ads profitable, which is why I brought it up. And I realized that the people that were filing in summer are the super prepared, ultra plan, they love planning everything to a T, right? They're super prepared. They're ready to file their taxes 6 months early, right? So these people aren't price sensitive. They They don't care about the discount. They're going to like file their taxes 6 months early, whether you put a 10 or 20% discount, it doesn't matter, right? So I actually brought this up to the founder directly in a meeting. I was like, why do you do that actually? And he was like, good point. And they changed the pricing. My Google ads became super profitable within a day. And, you know, the KPIs across the company improved massively. So, yeah, like there's the sort of impact you can sort of make in a startup. And I think for someone who was running their own startup at the time, Enlightened Learning, tutoring company, and I still run that to this day, it was a super valuable experience for me to see how that sort of a, not early stage, but mid-stage startup actually works.
Wow, that's so interesting. I generally think like these startup internships are so useful.
Yeah, 100%.
They probably helped you get your full-time AlphaSights, and like I think these bigger companies really value seeing these students get experience at these smaller places.
Absolutely.
So yeah, like talking about AlphaSights, what is it that you do exactly, and what do AlphaSights do, I guess?
Yeah, sure. Good question. So AlphaSights itself, I would describe ourselves as primary knowledge partner. So any sort of company really, but mainly consulting companies, investment companies, as well as big corporate companies. Whenever they're conducting any piece of research, for whatever purpose it might be, they need to sometimes go past Google and ChatGPT, right? And get some real experiences from people who've been there and done it. So what we call experts, right? Industry experts. And what those companies do is they come to companies like us, AlphaSights, to help them conduct that research. And that can be done in various ways. It can be that AlphaSights actually does just help carry out that research with the experts and produces documents and graphs and research to give to the clients. But a most common way at this moment in time, at least, is setting up calls with the experts and our clients. So we sort of make sure that, well, first we take the project that the client is doing, understand it, dissect it a little bit, right? Understand the industry so that we can speak to the expert, obviously not on the same level because they've been doing this job for like 20 years and I've just learned about it 10 minutes ago. But, just be able to understand their language and then, talk to the expert, see if they can help with this specific project, and then set them up with the client. And for me, that's what I specifically do. Other teams in AlphaSights, their functions can vary a little. So like I said, some teams are doing a lot more of the actual research themselves, for example. But yeah, that's how I would describe AlphaSights.
Very interesting. Seems like a cool company. I guess we'll leave it there. But before we do, one question. Just for students applying now to spring weeks, to internships, to grad schemes, what is your one tip, one piece of advice that you would give to people who are going through these very difficult and stressful applications?
Yeah. It's one of the worst job markets there's ever been. So
it's cooked.
It is cooked. And to be honest, it was quite bad even when I was applying, and I think it's only going to get worse with the emergence of AI. So look, I would segment again my advice into two sections. So for those who are applying to spring weeks, those who are applying to summer internships, the things you're applying to, keep them broad, because at that point, no one is expecting you to have experience. You could theoretically get spring weeks or summer internships anywhere. So apply to everywhere you can and make it a numbers game. That's what I would say. But when it comes to graduate applications, that's when I think it's time to shift mindset and think about how do I use my past experiences now to tailor myself into a specific industry or specific companies even, and target those as much as I can. Because the graduate job market is obviously even more tough than I would say summer internships or spring weeks. So employers, I think, really like to see some sorts of connection between why you're applying to them further than just, I need a job, right? So I would really think about, when it comes to graduates' perspective, how do I use my past experiences to link myself to a specific industry, to a specific company, and only really apply to those. It doesn't have to be a clear-cut link. It can be a loose link. It can be a half link. It's how you paint the picture and how you tell a story. But it's just more about showing that link and allowing the manager that's interviewing you, the hiring manager, to feel that link is real. And that's what's going to set you apart from most candidates who just apply for the sake of applying.
Wow, that's really, really good advice. I'll definitely take that when I start applying.
Yeah,
this
sounds
coming
good.
fall. But no, thank you very much for your time. It's been a really enlightening conversation. And yeah, hopefully I see you again soon.
Yeah, no worries.
Perfect.
Pleasure.
Thank you.